And this morning, we're joined by both candidates here in our studio, Cheryl Cole and Cheeto Vela. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So let's start with kind of the basic question of a lot of people, a lot of the slogans in this race before the election was, I'm not Dawnna Dukes. But let's talk a little bit about what will make you different in representing HD 46. So Cheryl Cole, what would representation look like for you specifically, and how would it be different from Mr. Vela?
Well, I've always had a broad coalition of people that I worked with and led on issues such as reproductive rights, marriage equality, workers' safety, comprehensive planning, affordability, and education. So I have that record before sitting on council and after council.
And what would your representation look like, and how would it be different from Mrs. Cole?
Well, my background, I'm an activist, I'm a fighter, I'm a litigator, I'm an attorney, I do criminal defense and immigration work. And I want to take that fighting spirit, that grassroots spirit into the Texas House. It's a Republican-dominated body. Really radical Republicans are controlling the agenda at this point. And so what I want to make sure is that the representative from House District 46 goes in there and is really ready to fight and to push back and to aggressively push the Democratic agenda. We need to have a champion, a fighter. There's just not a lot of room to compromise at this point, and there's not a lot of Republicans that are willing to sit down at the table and compromise with us.
Let me follow up on that, because the House is made up of a coalition, right, of kind of business Republicans and Democrats, and there is kind of that working relationship sometimes on some issues. If you're going to be an advocate fighter on all the progressive issues all the time, how are you going to get things done with maybe the Republicans to bring stuff back home to HD 46?
So there's two areas where I believe that a coalition can be formed between Democrats and Republicans. The first is in Medicaid expansion, in health care. Texas has not accepted the Obamacare federal dollars, and that's really hurting urban areas, but it's devastating rural areas. You're seeing rural hospitals close. You're seeing people in rural counties unable to access health care. You're seeing women having to drive 3 hours to go to a hospital to give birth. Rural Republicans need the Medicaid expansion just like urban Democrats do. And I believe that there is a common interest there that we can work together to expand Medicaid. The other area would be education funding. Our urban school districts are really feeling the pinch right now, sending a lot of money back to the state and seeing their per student funding from the state decline. Rural school districts are in the same situation. You're seeing rural school districts drop things like band and theater and are really having to tighten their belt. So again, we both know, rural Republicans and urban Democrats, we need better education funding. And again, in those two areas, education and healthcare, I believe that coalitions can be built between Democrats and Republicans.
And what about yourself? What are the areas where you're willing to make deals to get things done for HD 46, and then what are the areas that you are non-negotiable, you're fighting on this?
I have fought since the day I came into the world. My mother was a maid, my mother's mother was a maid, and I haven't just fought in connection with one issue that expresses democratic values. I have fought in connection with a broad range of issues, including immigration rights, including equality, including the Nathaniel Sanders. So I often resent the idea that I haven't fought, and I don't know if that's because I'm female or not, because I have. And I haven't just fought against the Republican agenda at the local level on behalf of local control. I've delivered on it.
And are there any issues, though, because you are going to have to make deals with Republicans to bring stuff home back to HD 46. They run the show in the Texas House. How are you going to work with them?
I think on a number of issues that we can work together. I have worked for the Texas Municipal League and at the City of Austin, and actually testified against bills that eroded local control where there were Republican members who stood for the same thing. And I think the same thing is true on property tax increases and education funding. We have to take on Dan Patrick and Greg Abbott for their positions in not adequately sending money to Austin and sending $500 million away.
Let's talk about education funding specifically as a policy, because everybody is going to agree that there needs to be more resources for HD 46. But what's a policy proposal specifically that you would advocate for to get the money into the schools?
Well, there's actually two things. One, when we actually set up the formula for school financing, it was based on a coalition with urban cities or counties. And what we've seen is that people have moved out of those counties and into the suburbs. So I think that we can form coalitions with suburban districts to try to challenge the current formula. And then the second thing that I've noticed is that Governor Greg Abbott, when he laid out his proposed agenda for cities, which I disagreed with at every level and would fight against, he made an exception for public safety. And I believe that that was done because public safety is so much a part of the Republican agenda. So I think the one avenue that we could take is seeking more funding for public safety as opposed to just public education. Because in the city of Austin and in this district, public safety is a big chunk of the budget.
And would you do it that way, or would you do it a different way?
I don't think we can seriously talk about education funding in the state of Texas until we identify new revenues. We cannot continue to cut smaller pieces of a shrinking pie and expect that to do the job. We need new revenue. One of my proposals is to legalize and tax marijuana and dedicate that revenue to education. I think that will both cut our spending on criminal justice issues, because we're going to get a lot of these petty kind of misdemeanor possession of marijuana cases off the court's dockets, and then it will generate revenue for the education system, as we've seen in Colorado, as we've seen in Washington State, as we've seen in Nevada. And I understand that you know, that's a new concept for Texas, but when I would much rather tax marijuana sales than raise property taxes.
We're going to take a quick commercial break right now, but then we'll be back with both the candidates.
Okay, thank you.
And thanks for joining us again for State of Texas. We're here with both of the remaining candidates for House District 46, Cheryl Cole and Cheeto Vela. We were talking about education just a little bit ago, but now we're going to talk about affordability, the other big issue in the district. And we'll start with you, Mrs. Cole. What are some specific policy ideas that you would like to see implemented that would help your district when it comes to affordability?
I think that we have to form broad coalitions to deal with this issue. And we have to fight against people, Republicans mostly, who are against affordability. When I was on the city council, I led the effort to pass the affordable housing bonds after they failed. And I assembled a broad coalition to do that. And I think that in many of the districts that may actually have a Republican representative, that we can fight them on that issue because they are suffering from affordability, just like District 46.
And is there anything we can do besides the property tax level when it comes to development or specific policy proposals that you would like to see? Because displacement, gentrification, those are huge issues in District 46.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the whole premise that is creating or reason that we have an affordability problem is the exodus from the city to further and further out. And that gets us into needing to understand and examine our environmental policies. And the TECQ, which is a state agency, and other agencies have been just lax, despicable in terms of enforcement of the environmental policies. And I've worked on those extensively, and that would be important to the district, not only because of the environment, but also because of affordability.
And Mr. Vela, is there anything that you would specifically push to tackle displacement, gentrification?
That is really the most important issue in Austin now. I hear about it when I knock on doors all over the district. That's usually the first thing that people mention, is that this neighborhood is changing so much, and all the neighbors that have been here for decades are being forced to move elsewhere. Sadly, the city councils of the past have not dealt with the issue, and it has gotten out of control now. Housing is not an issue that the state of Texas has traditionally dealt with, but I would look to add funding to the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, who has traditionally been responsible for providing housing assistance. We need to get the state more involved in providing affordable housing, because our cities just do not have the resources that they need. And it's not just a problem in this district. If you look at Houston, if you look at Dallas, affordability is starting to be a concern all over the state. San Antonio, a traditionally very affordable city, is also, you're starting to see rents creep up, and you're starting to see home prices increase. So although the state of Texas has not traditionally been involved in this area, hopefully we can come together with the other urban areas to provide additional funding for affordable housing, particularly for your very low-income people, your people disabled on fixed income, Social Security. Those are the folks that are suffering more than anyone else in this rising housing price environment.
And the Travis County delegation at the state capitol, most of the representatives have a specific specialty in an area that they work on. Representative Israel works on transportation. Representative Howard is big on the budget and also in higher education. But Ms. Cole, what would be your specialty, or where would you fit in the team of Travis County Democrats?
I would like to fit into the team of promoting local control, and that is generally the State Affairs Committee. And there are so many issues that I voted for that were attacked at the state legislature that I would like to champion. Environmental issues, social justice issues, health and human service issues, especially for the poor and disenfranchised, criminal justice issues. And so that's where I would like to serve. And
what about yourself?
Well, the Travis County delegation is extremely talented and capable. I, as a criminal defense attorney, I would like to focus on criminal justice issues, criminal justice reform. That's an area that I know very well. That's an area where, again, there's room to work with Republicans. The state of Texas has closed prisons over the last few years, generating substantial savings. Again, let's start looking at some of those petty offenses and get them off the dockets to focus on crimes where people are endangered, where property is endangered, and not these kind of driving while license invalid and these small-time possession of marijuana cases that clog up our court system and cost us so much money even at the local level. So I would say criminal justice would be an area that I would focus on. I would love to serve on the Corrections Committee in the Texas House, and the other one would be immigration. I am an immigration attorney. I have represented many asylum cases. Really, the Texas legislature should not be dealing with immigration. That's a federal issue. But if they're going to deal with it, then I think we need voices on the Democratic side that understand the issue and that are ready to fight and to push back.
Now, really quickly, just because we're trying to differentiate between the two of you, last word for both of you of what is the biggest difference between you and Mr. Vela?
I have actually cast a vote about the Democratic values, and he has not. We are in a campaign. It's fairly easy to say that you will be for those democratic values, but I've had to fight for them too. And I've had to fight for them at the local level, and I've had to fight for them at the state legislature. And I have a record of broad coalitions with all types of people, demographic groups, income levels, and especially the low income. And so I think that is the biggest difference. So in terms of saying there's a difference, there's not so much a difference as there's a lack of any activity to support those values.
And what about yourself? What's the biggest difference between you and Mrs. Cole?
Well, I would point to my experience and knowledge of state government. My first job out of law school, I was an assistant attorney general with the Texas Attorney General's office in the Open Records Division. I'm very familiar with open records laws and then the Attorney General's office as a whole. And then I worked in the House of Representatives for 4 years, and I know the House, I know the games, I know how they're played. I'm ready to step in with detailed knowledge of the state, its functions, detailed knowledge of the House of Representatives, its functions, and get to work on day one.
Mr. Vela, Mrs. Colt, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.